Hello out there, and it is morning as I'm recording this, and we are having such a windy, cold, snowy, blustery day in a series of many. And I love winter. I'm a winter person, but the wind is certainly making things challenging. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of being a guest on the Tendrils of Grief podcast with Susan Ways. And we both came into this a little bit of a hot mess because I forgot to confirm. So she didn't know I was ready to meet, but we did it anyway. And what happened as a result of that was just a really heartfelt, authentic, meaningful conversation, which is one of my favorite things. But she had asked me the question about why is it that people engage in what she referred to as this gang mentality? So, and so to reframe that and explain it further, like I think the question is, why do people join in on attacking or targeting someone else? Why do people engage in patterns of alienating other people? Why do people follow the bully, basically? Although toxic people aren't always bullies. This phenomenon of someone not just being a bystander in poor behavior, but actively participating in it is one that is very fascinating to me. And I have been on the receiving end of exclusion, targeting, false narratives. This is in both work situations and friend groups. So I know what this is all about. I know how it feels. I'm not speaking about this from a lofty perch as a psychotherapist. I mean, part of what I'm going to say is going to come from that. But a lot of this is coming from my own experience and observation. As I was talking to Susan about, again, what she referred to as this gang mentality, what dropped down for me were the terms toxic belonging. And I've long thought that people do things outside their values, outside their comfort zone, outside their moral compass because they want to belong. Now, there are very dark archetypes out there right now who have figured this out, right? Who know that they can manipulate someone's need to belong. This is part of why here where I live in Ontario, Canada, minor hockey is such a big deal. So what I'll just explain that. That means youth hockey, right? This is why people are vulnerable to joining cults. Yes, I just said those two things back to back. But toxic belonging is when people's need to fit in overrides their common sense, and it is driven by the fear of being alone or alienated. I'm going to take a little bit of a closer look at this because the tendency to this starts when we're children, as we take in messages from people who are in a position of authority, right? So, not consciously most of the time, people who are in a position of authority, let's think teachers, coaches, parents, even to a certain extent, friends are going to say things to us that can bring about feelings of shame, guilt, fear of not fitting in. And this becomes part of our inner orientation to what we need to do to feel safe. It becomes part of our belief system. And I think that there are other aspects of our personalities that are going to make us more vulnerable. I think people who are more wired for empathy and empathic connection are going to be less influenced by this because they can identify with, that person who's being targeted. All of that being said, belonging is the basic human need, and toxic refers to when something that is harmful spreads throughout the ecosystem. So it makes sense that there are many people who would be vulnerable to submitting their own personal power to whatever the authority is in order to have that sense of belonging. So this is going to show up on a global scale. This shows up in work and school and community systems. This shows up most often in family systems. What did you have to do to fit in with your family? What behavior did you need to engage in or participate in? Toxic belonging is something that can influence all of us. And if you stop to think about it, it's all around us. The natural answer to this is to value your own autonomy, sovereignty, kind heart, if appropriate, uniqueness. If you think about it, one of the things that happens with toxic belonging is you start losing bits of your identity. You may talk the same, dress the same. You might be vulnerable to believing slogans. But if you're wanting to avoid this, standing in your own unique identity and being true to what you value is the way to go. And the other people will find you. And at this stage of my life, my inner mantra is I don't want to attend a party that I wasn't really invited to. So belonging is key, but you do need to use some discernment around scenarios where you really want to belong or whether you'd rather have the boundary of being on the outside, and then getting very clear about where that belonging is. In my experience, it takes one person to set the stage for this toxic belonging. One grandiose, entitled, or perhaps deeply insecure person whose need for ego supply, need for ego equanimity or stabilization comes from feeling the power of deciding who's in and who's out. Comes from deciding who's going to suck up to them and who's going to be a target or a threat to their position. So I encourage you, as you're going about your day or your week, to notice the signs of perhaps coercive control, perhaps more covert manipulation, but the ways that we're all fed this message that to belong, we must give away all of the best parts of ourselves. And on that note, I will get back to doing my regular work, or as, kind of back to my regularly scheduled programming. And I, from the depths of my own heart, wish that you find true belonging in your world. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this message resonates with you, share the hell out of it. Subscribe, like, comment, post your own version of it. And that is what's going to help get more positive messages out there into this interesting time that we're living in. Thanks so much, and I hope to connect with you soon.